those people who are still getting into the space a path forward and some next steps. Next up, we have Melinda Williams from Dstillery. Dstillery comes from the data science side of the house. And Claudia is the chief data scientist there. Melinda works closely with her. And they've been incredibly helpful to many brands in harnessing the power of data science for their objectives. If you remember the Great Mind Awards last year, their Chobani work, I think it was the big Grant Ogilvy Award winner, right? If I remember correctly. So very, very interesting work coming in from Dstillery. So Melinda is going to take a different approach to the whole data science question. Programmatic kind of jumps 17 steps forward, right? Programmatic is all about targeting audiences and segmenting and buying them in very, very specific ways, and is the lifeblood of what is called audience-based selling today. Research insights wasn't so key to it. It was much more about action, targeting, segmentation, buying, pricing, and so on. But now several people who helped make programmatic and helped make it so big are taking a step back and telling us how we can treat programmatic as essentially giant focus groups, how we can garner insights that help drive other parts of the business, not just the sort of targeting and buying aspects of it. So with that, let me invite Melinda up, who's going to talk to us about Dstillery and how they handle some of these questions.
Love it. So thanks for that talk, Jeffrey. That was really great. And I like the idea of the Twitter experiment where you were able to start with people who have had a particular experience rather than just asking them what their experience was. And so what I'm going to talk about today actually extends that idea a little bit about, if you ask someone what they think, they might tell you something. We've kind of learned last year you might not hear exactly a totally accurate view of what they're thinking. But if you watch their behavior, you can get a much more accurate view of what's going on. And you can get that view at scale, and you can get it in real time, and you can do it again and again and again. So this is an advertisement. This is actually a TV advertisement. So if you Google potato Super Bowl ad, you can, it's the first hit on YouTube. You can watch the entire thing. It's a 30-second spot. There's no voiceover, no sound, no music, no motion at all. So I actually just saved the tech hurdle of putting a video in my deck and just put the still image because it's really the same experience you're getting right now. So shortly after the Super Bowl this year, Cards Against Humanity put out a blog post where they said, they announced that sadly they had spent all of their company's money on this potato Super Bowl ad. They were now going bankrupt and going to be closing up shop. They got exactly 0 ROI on the ad. And thanks, everybody. So you can even go to Twitter and see some of the reactions, some live tweets happening during the Super Bowl. Obviously, the reception apparently was not exactly that great. But in the blog post, it's actually a nice, really humble postmortem on the campaign. What exactly went wrong? They sort of admit that they realize now that the world wasn't ready for this type of advertising. But then they dig in a little bit deeper, and they have some really key insights, like instead of asking one person if the ad was effective 70 times, we should have asked 70 people once. There you go. I think we can all learn a lot from that type of lesson. And because this is about measurement, we can go a little deeper on the types of lessons learned. So in their blog post, they go into a lot of detail about they actually did use a lot of research to come up with this ad. So they went into a lot of detail about the research that went into choosing which vegetable they should use to feature on the ad. And they made a very data-driven choice here. I don't know if this was survey-driven or where they got this data, but they really focused in on the data. But then when it came down to it, they realized we were asking the wrong questions. This is a classic trap. We spent too much time in selecting the right potato for the ad. We never stopped to question whether a potato would convey the essential brand experience of Cards Against Humanity. So I think we can all learn a lot from this, and we can in particular think about whether or not we're asking the same person 70 times, or we're asking 70 person once, or should we ask 7,000 people, 70,000 people. And so this is where I want to get a little bit into programmatic and rethinking how we use programmatic and how programmatic works into the life cycle of a campaign. So we're used to thinking of this programmatic ecosystem as really an execution machine, right? So sure, you get some insights out, you run your campaign, you find out how well it did, but by and large, we really think of this as a machine for executing the campaign. But if we take a step back and we think about what's really driving this thing, there is a ton of data. If you really look at this, there's a whole mess of super rich, super high dimensional data. We can look at where customers, what's their behavior, what are their interests and their habits and their preferences as they move through the digital world, as they move through the physical world. We can look at their research or their purchase intent as they're researching products, actually making the purchase. And then in the programmatic space, we're constantly actually intervening on these people, right? We're not just passive observers. We're giving them different messages, different content all the time. And we have the opportunity to then collect data on how people respond to different messaging, how they change their behavior, when they change their behavior, and how different things actually impact what they're going to do, what they're going to buy. So here we have really everything we need to get super rich, actionable insights already running through this machine. If we can just find the right machine learning algorithm to sort of pull apart this mess of data and find those actionable insights, then we're really ready to go. And the cool thing is that machine learning algorithm that's going to do that and going to find those actionable insights in that mess of data, those are actually exactly the same algorithms that we already have running to drive this programmatic machine. So let me give you a little better idea of what exactly I'm talking about. So this is, at Dstillery, the data that we're collecting, if I start from the right of this path, we're looking at, we see mobile phones, we see them as they move around the world, we see all this time-stamped data as they go to different physical locations, use different apps, they're spitting out different IP addresses. We can use our crosswalk to connect that to desktops and to tablets and see what websites they're going to. So now, say you're Mercedes-Benz, and you want to run a campaign, and you want to run a campaign to people who might be interested in going to your physical location, right? So we have everything we need here. We can use that machine learning algorithm and look at people who go to that location, all the other behaviors that might be predictive of going to that location. And if you're thinking of programmatic in kind of a traditional way, then I make that audience, I run the ads, I tell you how it went, and we're done, right? But what about that model that used all of this behavior to predict who was going to go to that physical location? So here is an example of an actual model. Now we're thinking about a model that lives in the web space. What websites, what actual individual URLs are predictive that someone is going to, at some point in the future, go physically to a Mercedes-Benz dealership? So you can look in, here these are categorized by types of websites. There's real estate, there's competitive research, other types of cars, things like that really specify brand and purchase intent. There's other things like fitness-type websites that tell you more about who the person is. There's all these signals, super rich, super detailed, that we can get into, that if you're using this platform just as a way to execute, all this you're just kind of dropping on the floor and you're never asking this question. But once you dig into what's driving your campaign, all of a sudden there's all these new questions you can ask and answers you can get from people's actual behavior. So I mentioned that data was all timestamped, so then we can look in a little bit deeper and say, when did all of these things actually happen in relation to the actual conversion event that we're talking about? The brand research maybe happened right before the conversion, or something else happened 4 weeks back in the future. We can look at how location signals come into this. Which locations over-index for the type of person that might be interested in this car, and how does that look on a map in relation to where the actual dealers are? From this kind of picture, we can actually get some research that really takes us pretty far away from programmatic advertising or even advertising at all. Where should I put my next dealership? Where should I put my next retail location? I see where people over-index for my brand. Maybe I can go there. I can use this as a research platform for that kind of level of planning. And then you can dig in and find out all kinds of other things about your customers. You can see what social issues they're interested in. You could take a look at maybe what TVs they like, what movies they like, what celebrities they're interested in. whatever you need to find out about who your customers are in order to design your messaging, think about your placement, think about what channels you're using even, you can get from this sort of real-time measurement system, real-time automatic survey, without actually asking them these questions. You get their honest answers based on what they're looking at on the internet. So if you think about how people sort of typically use programmatic advertising, first they design their messaging, then they bring that message to someone like us, and they say, OK, here's the audience, go find them, go deliver. And then we do that and come back and say, all right, it's done, here's how it looks. And what I'm proposing is we sort of flip this all around. You start off with that super data-rich programmatic platform and start by asking the question, who is my audience? What are they interested in? Where do I find them? All of those questions that you really need to answer before you can go and do what might have been step one and start to design your messaging. And then once your message is ready and you're ready to start delivering, you don't just stop there, right? So I said we're constantly intervening. We're constantly showing people messages, and we can measure them. So once you have your message, now you're going to run the ad. What you actually have is a giant petri dish with hundreds of millions of people in it. You can constantly test your messaging, see what's working, and change things from there. So to get a little specific, so far I've really been talking about the first bubble here, how to understand who your audience is before you even get started. And so I want to get a little more specific on this last bubble. How do I constantly keep this machine running where I'm always getting out more information and more understanding of what advertising is working and what's actually changing people's behaviors at different times? So this is the Trivanti project that Radha mentioned earlier. It's gotten a lot of good results and a lot of good press. And so we're talking about a campaign to sell yogurt, right? So we need to actually know who physically bought yogurt cups off the shelf. So the way we get that data is we were able to partner with Kantar Shopcarm. They have those loyalty cards. So we get that loyalty card data. They can connect it to an email address or a phone number. Then we can use LiveRamp to connect that to a cookie. And now we can feed that right into our ecosystem and connect that to all the other data I have. And so the cool thing is, we show all these different ads. We run a nice, clean experiment with a PSA. And so we show people a PSA. It doesn't influence their behavior or cause them to buy yogurt, but then we show these other ads, and different creatives have different impacts in terms of how much it actually influences people to buy more yogurt. And you can get some cool insights already from this. You can see that the creatives that have messages about the sweetness of the yogurt tend to only have kind of lower impact, and then the high impact ones are kind of about real fruit. So you can already learn what kind of messaging has a greater impact. But remember, we know a lot about these people. We can group them into different groups and different subpopulations, microcultures, based on their preferences. And so we can actually say, all right, we know these people are influenced. Who's the most influenced? It turns out that fitness users we saw, based on their web behavior, their physical location behavior, fitness enthusiasts are super influenced compared to maybe a car enthusiast is less influenced. And there's a lot of you can use this to design your creative, but there's a lot of other actionable insights in here. For instance, you want to sponsor a music festival. It looks like you should probably choose a country music festival, not a top 40 type musical festival, right? So there's a lot of really actionable stuff in here. And this isn't a profile of who your customer is. It's who's going to be impacted by seeing your ad. The cool thing is actually, though, when you bump it up against the market research, the traditional research that Trivanti was doing, it has a related picture. They knew some of this about their audience already. Fitness people are important. But then we're able to provide a much richer view. OK, so here's where I think it really gets cool. So now, we're looking at these different audiences, different micro populations, and how they're affected by this ad, right? And so now we can ask the question, which audience is most impacted by which message? So here we have 5 different messages. So on the creative, all of the images are going to be the same, just the copy is going to be different. And I want you to focus on the first one, where the message is, take a break, come back better. And then the fourth one here, dive into deliciousness. 2 totally different messages for the same product. So when we looked at people who were QSR eaters, these are people that we physically observed them on their phone at a quick serve restaurant, Subway, Quiznos, McDonald's. They were super impacted by that delicious message. It really resonated with them. But then that same set of messages, when we show them to gym goers, people go to Equinox, Gold's Gym, Crunch, the delicious message didn't really do much for them, but take a break, come back better was super influential to them. People saw that ad, and then they actually went and bought more yogurt because they saw this ad, take a break, come back better. So this is just one example, but I think it's really a great way to think about programmatic. Yes, it's great. It's a great way to deliver a message at scale. We can really execute really well with it. But also think of it as a giant room with that half-glass mirror, right? That giant focus group room. Or you can think of it as a giant petri dish where we can constantly be running these experiments and constantly be learning more about who my audience is and exactly which message I should show to them in order to get the most real impact for my brand. All right.